Hello everybody, I'm going to spin for you another story. This one takes me back to, when I was stuck in Ploshchad Ilitcha and I met Sergey, and Sergey said, oh, you have to go to India. And I ended up going to the Rerich Museum and I saw these pictures of the Himalayas and I was like, man, I just fell in love with the Himalayas just by looking at his pictures. And so I ended up actually going to the Himalayas. And there I was one day wandering along the banks of the Ganges, and everybody told me, there's these wise men everywhere you go, these sages, and you could talk to them. They're very open. They don't reject, even if you're a tourist or a foreigner. No, they take you in and they talk to you, and it's absolutely true. They're very open, and you could sit down and talk to a wise man or for as long as you want. It helps if they speak English, but a lot of them they do speak English. So there I was one day, wandering along the banks of the Ganges. I wasn't interested in learning anything, about a new religion or anything. I had studied Hinduism some. I've dabbled in it. I've read the Srimad Bhagavatam and the Bhagavad Gita and a lot of the Upanishads, but always I've maintained my Christianity. I've always been a Christian. I didn't go to India to teach people about Christianity nor to convert. I just went to India with my eyes open, and I wanted to see what India was. So I just went like a child with an innocent mind, eyes wide open, and I had just a really wonderful experience. I was wandering the Ganges River one day, the embankment, and one day, yes, I ran into this wise man, and he sat me down. He says, would you like to talk? And I said, yes, I would. And he says, what are you thinking about? And I said, well, I'm just walking, and I'm looking at the river, and I'm enjoying, this beautiful scenery. And he says, would you like to talk to me? I said, yes. We ended up sitting there talking 4 hours. It was a very, very interesting man. Afterwards, I went up and I bought a little bag of rice and I gave that to him, and that was it. That's all he wanted for the day. He told me something very important. He said, I live by the moment. And I said, well, sometimes I live by the month or by the week. And he says, well, it's better to live by the day, but it's even better to live by the moment. And I was like, wow, that's very, very profound. And so when we sat down, he wanted to teach me a lesson. He was older than me. He was in his 60s. And here I was, a young man. I thought I knew everything. No, after meeting this guy. And he says, look at the river. And the river was very deep, and it was flowing, and it was full of power and vitality. And it just kept going and going. And he says, listen to its sound and just watch it. And the river just kept going. And he said, now look over there. And there was these little pools, these stagnant pools that were away from the river. Apparently the river had risen, and then water had collected in these pools, and then the water had receded, and then the river was going down. You had these little pools where things were collecting in them. There was lots of maybe mosquitoes, and kind of scum was collecting, and dirt and grime, and this is where all of the disease came from, these little pools. Really bad things, bad mosquitoes and stuff. And he says, well, life is a lot like this. And he made this great, wonderful metaphor. And he says, life is like the river. In fact, he says, life is the river. Always moving, never stopping, never the same. No 2 days the same, no 2 moments the same. Everything completely impermanent and constantly in movement and constantly moving. And then he pointed over to the pools, and he says, the world that we live in is kind of like these pools. This is what everybody is doing, searching for security, searching for a type of permanency, wanting something pleasurable to last forever, or trying to build something material that's going to last forever. And he says, when this happens, we're living in this little stagnant pool, and the result is always scum, decay, death, and a type of chaos. And he says, live in the river. If you're going to live in the river. And he asked me how I had been living my life, up to this point. And I said, well, it's kind of like after I graduated university, I just started listening to myself, and if something inside of myself, I've been living inside of my intuition. So if something told me, go here, do this, I did it. And I told him, honestly, I never knew what was going to happen next. I didn't know what was going to happen the following day. I didn't know what was going to happen the following week. And all the way up to this point, from Honduras to Alaska to Ukraine to Crimea, and all of this happening, and here I am in India, I told him, yeah, honestly, even now, I don't know what's going to happen next. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, and I don't know if I receive a thought, where it's going to send me, but I told him when I do receive the thought, I will act upon it. But I do not know what's going to happen tomorrow. And he smiled and says, wow, this is a wonderful thing. This is a blessing. But whenever I spoke this way to my friends back in the United States, they're like, oh man, you're crazy. Even when I told them after university, I'm going to go to Honduras, and then I'm going to go to Alaska, and after Alaska, I'm going to go to the former Soviet Union. I'm going to live in Russia, and I'm going to live in Ukraine. Everybody, 99% of the people thought that I was insane. And they said, well, what are you going to retire on? They're like, Evan, you don't have any money. What are you going to do? You know, you're living with these Russians. You don't speak the language. They think differently. Everything is totally different. It's totally dangerous, and you're going to live there. And I thought I was going to live like 1 year, but it turned out to be 10 years in Russia and in Ukraine combined. But before I went into the adventure, everybody was telling me, no, no, no. And the wise man finally revealed it to me. It's because they're living in the pool. In the stagnant pool, nothing good happens. But the wise man said, in the river, everything good happens because the river is constantly flowing and it's impermanent. It's always new. I thought of a man who lived in the stagnant pool. He was this multi-millionaire. He was one of the presidents of one of the great big banks in the United States. I think he was the president of the Bank of America. And he had like $23 million in the bank. And one day, because the stock market was falling or the economy was bad, he lost like 13 million. But he still had several $1 million in the bank. But what did he do? And he took a gun and he killed himself. And I realized, wow, he still had a couple $1 million in the bank, but he lost 13. But he was living in the world of numbers. Yeah, he was living in that stagnant pool, searching for security. In his case, searching for security through, material. Some people do it through pleasure. But what the wise man told me, it never works because life is like the river. And you have to live for this day, for today. And you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So today you have to think, wow, this is the only thing I really have. So when I was listening to that man speak, I was like, yes, he's making a whole lot of sense. But when people were telling me, before I went on this, great adventure, into Eastern Europe, they were telling me, oh no, don't go. How are you going to take care of yourself? All of these questions, where are you going to live? What are you going to eat? But what are you going to do when you're 50 and 60 years old and you have no retirement? Because you're not connected to any system. And I said, well, that's just it. Just me as a human being, I can't be connected to any of these systems, even if they promise me some beautiful pension. Because I don't even know if, who knows if you're going to be even around to enjoy the pension or whether the pension's going to be there, when the time comes. So I kept saying, no, I can't live this way. I have to follow my instinct. I have to follow my intuition. And boom, I went. And the old man, he said, in the river, only if you're connected to the river will life take care of you. If you're in the stagnant pool, you have to take care of yourself. But if you're in the river, what he calls the river of life, that's constantly moving, constantly flowing, very deep, full of power, full of vitality, he says, if you're part of this, then he said, this is like the whole key to what I'm trying to tell you. He said, life itself will take care of you. And there's no longer you taking care of yourself. You don't have to really take care of yourself because he says you have become part of life, meaning you have become part of the flowing river. And since you are part of the flowing river, the whole river, which is life itself, the entire universe, will take care of you and does take care of you. And he said, it's done it to me. And I said to myself, well, yeah, if I think about how I arrived here, so many things completely out of my control, I would have to say, yeah, these words were really golden. That once you give yourself to something greater than yourself, that something must, I can say, take care of you. And then for the rest of your life, you are taken care of. So at that point, you don't have to think in terms of permanency or security because you're the most secure person in the world. So when my students ask me, Mr. Williams, should I live a secure life or an insecure life? I was like, no, you should live an insecure life. Live your life as insecure as possible, and oh man, you will be so happy. Hope you enjoyed the story about the river. There'll be more to come. Thank you.